I'd argue that everyone has experienced situations that are so frustrating it feels almost as if your feelings cannot be contained or regulated. For instance, I have a friend who's going through a lot right now, and their distress has been so overwhelming to the point where one day, their frustration got the best of them and they ended up throwing something and shattering an item in their room. Shortly after this incident, this person suggested we go to a rage room to relieve ourselves of pent-up stress and get rid of the urge to smash things. Somehow, I was the only one who saw a problem with this mentality and I had to be the party pooper. They tried to justify it, saying it's better than smashing things at home since it would be a designated place for it, so you can just contain your anger, release it in an appropriate setting, and then return to the world relieved of your anger and stress. And this has a lot to do with the common mentality that people have about anger. If you have too much, you'll burst. So you have to find a cathartic method to release it, or else it'll just come out in inappropriate ways. Catharsis is a term that was coined by Aristotle and reviewed by Freud, who believed that repressed feelings would build up within you and hinder you, in turn causing a lot of psychological problems. We can illustrate this with a metaphor using a glass of water, where the glass represents the body and the water represents anger. So throughout life, your glass fills and you have the general capacity to contain your anger until you have too much of it. Then you reach a certain threshold where you don't quite have enough room for more. Once you pass this threshold, you reach a breaking point where you blow up. In order to avoid this from happening, you need to pour a bit of water appropriately every now and then so you don't ever explode on anyone. But is this really how anger works? And are rage rooms and aggression really as therapeutic as people make it out to be? Well, it turns out that they're not. Empirical journals have been inconsistent in actually proving that catharsis works, and the belief that venting your violence to rid yourself of hostile tendencies has never been supported by research. People expect that engaging in cathartic behaviors will reduce their anger, but when studies are done on catharsis, they show that it has the exact opposite effect, and that people who engage in catharsis to eliminate their aggressive behavior will be a lot more aggressive and have a harder time regulating their anger than those who use other methods to reduce their anger. There is another simple explanation as to why so many people are under the impression that it is good. It feels good, so it must be beneficial. But should you engage in any behavior just because it feels good? These behaviors that trigger your reward system could be very dangerous, especially because they're inherently psychologically addictive. It has been proven that aggression has similar addiction and relapse rates as drug dependence. So this is a very slippery slope that should be taken seriously, and you should be careful about indulging in this coping method. This can be demonstrated through principles of operant conditioning, where we can be reinforced into repeating certain behaviors based on how rewarding they feel. The more you reinforce a certain behavior for a pleasurable outcome, the stronger the cycle becomes. If you get angry and you let all your aggression out, this behavior may make you feel good and relieved of your anger shortly after you let it out, up until the next time your anger gets triggered. You're essentially teaching yourself that when you get upset, this is the way you respond to make your unpleasant feelings go away, thus strengthening the reinforcement of the behavior. This offers a good explanation as to why catharsis does the exact opposite of what is intended. It does not provide relief, it just encourages you to practice your aggression. Evolutionary psychologists argue that we have the strong urge to respond to anger in this way because of evolution. It was once a beneficial trait to have that ensured survival, so it was the people who were more aggressive that were able to ward off predators, defend their territory, find a mate, and fight other competitors that bred and passed down their genes so that their future generations could survive in that environment. But evolution works really slowly, so although it feels good and reinforcing, our bodies and monkey brains don't exactly know the difference between the benefits of aggression in a historical context and the downsides of aggression in a modern context and society. So if we're angry and have the urge to express it in these ways, what are you supposed to do instead? Now let's revisit the idea that Freud had about how suppressing your anger is also not good for you, because that portion of his argument does have some truth to it. Suppressing your anger can result in severe physiological distress, and this can become unconscious. Suppressing anger and exhibiting physiological symptoms of your distress without any awareness is also not healthy. So there must be a healthy way to experience your anger without involving aggression. Psychologists note the importance of feeling the anger and expressing it in therapy because the anger is a reaction to a stimulus, so it serves a purpose and it has a meaning. Rage rooms do not help people find the meaning behind their anger. It's just a coping mechanism used to eliminate the distress by displacing it onto something else without even processing it. But trying to tackle it on the surface won't do anything to prevent the feeling from returning. People are encouraged to use arousal-decreasing activities, which result in very drastic outcomes that are stable over time across participants of various genders, races, ages, and cultures. These processes help you relax by not acting on anger as soon as it's felt and taking a step back instead, which is actually quite uncomfortable and difficult for many. But EFT therapists offer validation, acknowledgement, and expression of these legitimate feelings so they can learn to express it without harm and explore the deeper meaning behind their anger. Multiple meta-analytic reviews on anger treatments explain how the most successful intervention for treating pathological anger is CBT, which includes relaxation, cognitive restructuring, exposure-based interventions, and assertiveness training. These interventions teach people to confront a stimulus that would induce anger by instead performing a different reaction or behavior before anger arousal occurs, which is the exact opposite of what rage rooms tap into. In conclusion, rage rooms are not inherently bad. People may go to one for various reasons, and physical activity can be both good for the body and the mind. However, if they are used to avoid a deeper meaning behind anger by displacing it for relief, rage rooms will give you the exact opposite effect you may be searching for. In order to decrease feelings of anger, you should let yourself experience your emotions and learn to decrease arousal before it gets worse.